Hi, this is Stacy Higginbotham with GigaOM, and I'm here with Nandan Nayampally, who's the Director of CPU Product Marketing at ARM. Hi, Nandan.
Hi, Stacy.
Hi. So what we're doing here today is we're talking about ARM as a company, the latest and greatest core that they've released, which is super fast, super powerful, and going to take ARM into new markets, and also the architecture wars, ARM versus Intel, or ARM versus x86. So let's get started. Nandan, can you tell me a little bit about ARM's business model for people who are unfamiliar with it?
So ARM's business model is one of its greatest strengths. ARM licenses microprocessor technology to various semiconductor vendors, and it has also built around it a very rich ecosystem of operating system vendors, tool providers, software application content providers, methodology and services providers. So what this helps the semiconductor vendor do is to cut the cost of developing their own processor architecture and tool chain importantly year over year, and the costs keep increasing. And it saves ARM the cost of having a manufacturing and distribution channel. So it's a benefit not just for the semiconductor vendors and ARM, but also for the entire ecosystem around it. And what this also enables the semiconductor vendors to do is to differentiate their solutions based on an ARM architecture with their specialties included on the final system on chip.
Okay. And given that, you guys are pretty familiar to many of our readers as being the application processors, the brains inside of cell phones, or being part of those chipsets. So what are you guys introducing with Osprey, and where is that going? Where are those cores going to end up?
So as you've said, ARM is known for being in mobile phones. A little known fact is also that it is in a lot more devices than just mobile phones. ARM has shipped about 4 billion units of processors in the last year, 12 billion over the last decade and a half. And so a lot of the digital home entertainment devices and enterprise components that you start seeing, things like home gateways, set-top boxes, are beginning to carry ARM architecture. What is also emerging over the last couple of years is the new netbook market, which is both ways looked at as an extension of the smartphone or a slim version of the laptop. And ARM's presence in the smartphone makes it a natural fit into that marketplace. And so a lot of what we're doing for this generation and the next is to provide platforms that not only go into the netbook spaces and that are opening up, but also into more mid-range and higher-end enterprise applications, things like routers, media servers, gateways, digital home entertainment components, higher-end DTVs or things of that nature. And also we're beginning to see the need for low-cost computation, lots of low-cost computation with fanless devices, low-cost packages. So ARM's natural ability to deliver a lot of performance at low power begins to fit into the global trend towards green computing, as well as a counter to high energy cost.
Okay, and so as a kind of tie into that, Osprey, what kind of performance are you going to get on the highest end, and what kind of power consumption are you going to see?
So in fact, Osprey has two implementations that we're introducing. Both are based off of the Cortex A9 processor, a processor that we introduced midway through last year. And we've introduced two dual core implementations. The headline grabbing one that you've heard of about is the 2 gigahertz dual core, and the entire 2-core cluster would operate at under 2 watts. But if you actually get to a lot of what we would consider a netbook or a meat part of the market, doesn't require nearly as high a performance. So we have a power optimized implementation that goes 800 megahertz to a gigahertz, again per core, and the total power consumed there would be less than half a watt.
And how does that compare with Intel's Atom chips for netbooks?
So based on just early analysis that we can look at comparative, we should be about a fifth of the power in that realm of netbook platforms of today. And certainly at the higher end, we're quite a bit lower than platforms that you see of comparable performance.
Sure. Now, if I'm comparing apples, well, I guess it's ARM to Intel, you're looking at lower power in pretty much both implementations,
Yes.
but on the less
It-
power intensive implementation, that's going to be a good half a gigahertz or 500 to 600 megahertz less power than Intel's Atom chip.
So,
I'm thinking about 800 megahertz to 1 gigahertz
uh-huh.
versus Atom at 1.6 gigahertz.
Right. So if you look at the dual core implementation, it's a full, there are two cores running at 800 megahertz to a gigahertz. And so the overall performance that it can provide is pretty significant, and it would be comparable to a netbook platform, let's say, running at 1.5 gigahertz, 1.6 gigahertz.
Okay.
But it would still be, as based on our analysis, about a fifth of the power.
Got it. And earlier, you said that you guys in the last year have sold 4 billion? Or
Yes,
your
our partners have shipped about 4 billion units.
up from 12 billion over a decade and a half?
Yes.
So a third of the ARM-based products that you guys have made have shipped in the last year?
It's a constantly increasing volume that you see. Obviously, you didn't have as many smartphones in '99, or phones in mobile phones in general in '99 that you have today. But also, it's it's an indication of ARM growing into other markets. So ARM actually has a large portion of its volume going into mobile, which is certainly a very large growth industry at the moment. But it's also getting into microcontrollers. It is getting into, as I said, in enterprise and home entertainment type sockets. So what you're seeing, in fact, the significant growth over the last 3 to 5 years has been in the other markets as well, apart from the traditional growth of the mobile industry.
Wow, that's fantastic. So let's talk about ARM versus x86, the
Mhm.
x86 architecture, because we have seen ARM try to move upmarket into netbooks. We've also seen your biggest rival on the x86 side, Intel, trying to introduce application type processors with radios attached for the mobile market, and even entering the embedded market with set-top box and TV kind of things. So what does ARM have to allow it to compete with Intel on the traditional PC market, and what do you have to help fend off Intel as it kind of comes into your traditional markets?
So one of the great levelers, if you will, and in fact a big driver for ARM to get into the netbook world is its presence in the smartphone world and the volume that OS providers, web content providers see for ARM-based solutions. And what you will see is web technology is becoming more and more ubiquitous, and devices that can support the web are becoming more and more ubiquitous. At the same time, the costs for those devices are extremely low, the margins are small, and the power requirements are very, very small as well, which is where ARM comes in. But the other portion of it is that with the volume, we are beginning to see the traditional web technologies like Flash, which are across the web, Java, JavaScript, becoming natively available in ARM. So the values of the ARM system, which are low cost, multiple providers, and a very rich ecosystem of tool vendors, software providers, is being kind of enhanced into these new markets.
So the web was built built on x86 chips, but you're saying now it can run on ARM as well.
Yeah, the web is still a software solution. As long as you have the right software, you can work on it. So we do see the web, natively being run on two major architectures just because of their incumbency or their volume, and that's so x86 and ARM feature as the top two architectures in that space.
And where does that leave MIPS and PowerPC and kind of other smaller architectures?
So we have been making a lot of progress into the traditional spaces for MIPS and PowerPC, things like as I said, consumer markets and enterprise markets. We do see PowerPC certainly in the high-end server market, which they are focused on to deliver end solutions. In the IP space, we still have not seen as much growth, or in fact, we're beginning to take market share, I believe, from that. On MIPS, I do believe ARM's roadmap and R&D spend that is going into delivering year-over-year improvements, generation-to-generation improvements, are beginning to show it as a real kind of solution in that marketplace, especially when you consider that there's so much more software, tool support, etc. available for it, that it makes it that much more compelling to move to an ARM solution.
Okay. I think that's all we have time for today, but thank you so much, and that's it.
Thank you, Stacey.